want you to take a moment and imagine, and if you need to lower your eyes or even close your eyes, I want you to imagine walking into a room. And when you walk into a room, there's a person there to smile at you and greet you by your name. And as you go further into the room and you take a seat, you start to look around. And you see words, phrases, and pictures all around the wall that's affirming and that makes you feel comfortable, like you belong. And you put your things away, and you happen to look at the library that's in the room, and it's filled with books that represent everyone in the room, including you. And then the person that greets you says, "Hello, how are you? I need for you to tell me what you need from me that will allow you to be your best self in this class." My name is Robin McNair, and I am a restorative educator. Now, you may ask, what is a restorative educator? Don't worry, I'm going to tell you. A restorative educator is a facilitator of education who is committed to creating a restorative-based learning environment, committed to building and maintaining healthy, interlocked relationships, and providing spaces for opportunities to address and repair harm and transform conflict. I am an educator who is committed to giving children what they need academically, socially, and emotionally to be able to thrive at their highest self. A restorative educator, more than anything, is a person who is committed to being in right relationship with others and committed to teaching others how to be in right relationship with one another. Now, I wasn't always a restorative educator. As a matter of fact, there was a time where I can remember I was not in the right relationship with others. You see, when I began my educational journey, I was all about following policy. And sadly, before that, I was about following policy. And we've all heard of those songs and statements that say, the children are our future, let them lead the way. But sadly, the educational system presented a dim future for our children by writing policy that allowed children to be led from the school into the criminal justice system. You see, there's this thing called the School-to-Prison Pipeline. And unfortunately, I was one of the conductors. So you may ask, how does policy connect to the School-to-Prison Pipeline? Well, I'm going to tell you that too. In 1993, there was a law that was passed. And this law basically stated that any young person that would bring a weapon onto school grounds were to be expelled for a year. Soon after that, states started passing other statutes that put young people out of school for willful disobedience. And that willful disobedience statute punished young people for nonviolent behaviors through suspensions and expulsions. So the policymakers write the policy, and it is expected that teachers implement the policy. But no one thought the outcome was going to be 11 million children being suspended yearly, and most for nonviolent behaviors. So I remember when I would follow policy and I would justify putting a young person out of my classroom just for wearing something that was not according to the uniform policy, or maybe not even wearing their uniform. The policies protected me. I can also remember when I put young people out of my classroom for asking me the question, why? Because I felt like they were being disrespectful. Remember, willful disobedience. So I put them out. The policy also allowed me to create rules for my classroom, to give young people a 0 for not doing their homework, or to put young people out of my classroom because they had their head on their desk during my lecture. Now, I don't know who would be bored by my lectures in the classroom. So I felt like, hey, you didn't want to be in my class. You're not concerned about your education. So therefore, you can leave. And I was justified because policy protected me. Let me tell you something else policy did. The United States Justice Department agreed with the policies, and they allocated millions of dollars to create school resource officer programs that place law enforcement into our schools. And because of placing law enforcement into our schools, many of our young people were arrested. Many of our young people started on the path into the juvenile justice system. Sturtevant says that these programs formally codified placing children on the path from the school to prison. So for me, it was about upholding what these policies put in place. This is James. James comes from a single-family home. James lives in a neighborhood in which his zip code kind of gives you an idea of what type of neighborhood he lives in. James comes to school very tired because James watches his siblings while his mother goes to work. So when James comes into my classroom, James puts his head down. And I don't know why, because remember I told you my lectures, they the bomb. But James puts his head down. James got put out of my classroom every time he put his head down. The next school year, James didn't come back. And to this day, I don't know where James is. I realized that I had to shift my thinking. Because I remember the exact day that I chose to put people over policy. There was a young girl in my classroom. She wore a red bonnet in my class. First of all, you're going to come to my classroom late, and you're going to have the nerve to have a red bonnet on your head? So the uniform policy said girls cannot wear scarves or bonnets. Girls couldn't even wear shorts. That was uniform policy. So I told her, oh, you have to take the bonnet off your head. She said, why? I said, because girls can't wear, bonnets, uniform, policy says you can't wear bonnets. My hair's not done. Now, for you all who may not know, this right here is addition to my real hair. And in my culture, we like to add hair to our regular hair, especially if we want to do this. So, of course, she was getting her hair braided, and it wasn't finished. So she could either miss school because her hair wasn't done, or wear a bonnet so she wouldn't get picked on for her hair not being done. So let's get back to the story. She wasn't about to take that bonnet off her head. I said, you're not going to take the bonnet off? She said, no. So the Gun-Free Schools Act of 1993 that I just told you about allowed me to call the security guard to come and remove her from my classroom because she had a bonnet on her head, and it was against the uniform policy. She was removed, and I want you to think about how she felt. So you put this policy in place to help to keep schools safe. And we want to keep schools safe. But no one considered the emotional safety that was stripped away as a result of these policies. So this young lady left my room. She went to sit into this room called in-school suspension, and she was there the whole day. So not only did she miss my class, she also missed her 3 other classes because she had a bonnet on her head, a red bonnet. After that day, I realized, wow, Robin, you got to do something different. I no longer followed the uniform policy. If someone walked into my classroom with a scarf or a bonnet on their head, they stayed there. If someone walked into my classroom with a hoodie on, they stayed there. If someone walked into my classroom with a pair of black jeans on and not their regular tan uniform pants, you know those uniform pants, they stayed there. Because I decided I was going to no longer put young people out of my classroom because they're not dressed correctly. Because my goal now is to make sure students are validated, to know they belong, to feel free to be themselves, to let them know that I value them more as a human being than as someone I need to control with policy. So I went from having a zero-tolerance-based classroom to a restorative-based classroom. And in this classroom, I had conversations with young people, and I asked them, what would you like to be called in my classroom? How do you need me to treat you so you can be your best self in my classroom? I had conversations in my classroom so young people could get to know their peers Because I don't know what I have in common with you, so let's sit down and have a conversation so I can know you. Because when I know you and you know me, there is no room for fear. And we know conflict happens, but we also know that when conflict happens, you're not treating me this way because you don't like me or you're trying to get rid of me or, all this other stuff that we see happening. It's usually a conflict because of misunderstanding. So in my restorative classroom, I teach young people how to have conversations, those courageous conversations, to help repair the harm that's been done and to transform the conflict. It's time for us to get our leaders to start rewriting policy. We need to remind our leaders to write policy that will allow young people to feel affirmed, to feel free, and to create a future that's going to be bright for them. We want to remind our leaders to write policy that's going to be based on inclusion and not exclusion. We want to remind our leaders to write policy that's going to be based on social engagement instead of social control. As a restorative educator, I'm committed to doing that. Restorative-based learning environments, healthy, interlocked relationships, and being able to repair and transform conflict. That is my job. Being in right relationships start with rewriting the wrongs that's been put in place so we can make sure we are placing people over policy. Thank you.